Hello, Dr. Chrissy. Good to see you again. Um, can't believe this is the last Teach Me Something to do. Anyway, today I'm going to talk about what neurons are and how neurons work to send signals. First of all, the definition of a neuron is a specialized cell that transmits nerve impulses, and it is also called a nerve cell. They are the fundamental units of the brain and nervous system. And also they are responsible for receiving sensory input from the external world, for sending motor commands to our muscles, for transforming and relaying the electrical signals at every step in between. Now we will talk about the anatomy of a neuron. This is a diagram of a neuron. A neuron has three main parts: dendrites, an axon, and soma, the cell body. If we use tree as an analogy for the neuron, dendrites can be likened to branches, axon can be likened to roots, and soma can be likened to trunk. So as we can see from the structure of the dendrites, this branch-looking part works as the receiving organ of the neuron. It receives signals from the other neuron. And so the dendrites receive synaptic inputs from axons. So the information basically goes from dendrites to cell body to axon and to another dendrites. And if the sum total of dendritic inputs is higher than the threshold potential, neuron will fire an action potential. There's something really interesting here regarding the action potential. So that thing is called the refractory periods. Refractory periods is something, so for a very brief moment after one action potential is fired, it is impossible to trigger the second action potential. I know you play WoW. You know, there are many skills, and all the skills have skill cooldowns, right? Skill cooldown time. So you can't use your ultimate great skill like every second because there's skill cooldown time, just like that. Neurons cannot fire action potential every millisecond because of the refractory periods. So basically, refractory periods are skill cooldown times in video games. Okay, so the axon, which is similar to the root of a tree, this is the long, thin structure which generates the action potentials, and it is a transmitting part of the neuron. After initiation, action potentials travel down the axons to cause a release of neurotransmitter. And soma, the trunk part, is a spherical part of the neuron that contains the nucleus. Nucleus is that little circle. And it connects the dendrites and axon. It's a channel for the information to be transported from the dendrites to the axon. The transported information in the axon is sent to the other neurons that are connected. And that's how the neurons communicate information with each other. Normally, the inside of the cell is around negative 70 millivolt, and that's called the resting membrane potential. And when sum total of all the excitatory and inhibitory inputs makes the neuron's membrane potential reach around negative 40 millivolt, the action potential is fired. There's only either fire or no fire, which means that there is no half firing of the action potential. Next, I want to talk about how neurons talk to each other. There's something called synapse, and it's a junction between two nerve cells. It consists of a mini gap across which impulses pass by diffusion of a neurotransmitter. When an action potential reaches the presynaptic terminal, it causes neurotransmitter to be released from the neuron into the synaptic cleft. After traveling across the synaptic cleft, the neurotransmitter receptors will be attached on the postsynaptic side, and depending on the neurotransmitter released. Positive ions such as sodium, potassium, or calcium, or negative ions, chloride ion, will travel through the channels. Okay, there are actually two systems that neurons belong to. One is called central nervous system, another is called peripheral nervous system. So here, this is a human body, and central nervous system consists of brain and spinal cord, and this controls the activities of the body. And the peripheral nervous system comprises all the other nerves except the brain and the spinal cord, and this is under our voluntary control, and it controls our muscles and joints, and it also sends all the information from our senses back to our brain. Lastly, I want to talk about three types of neurons. There are sensory neurons, motor neurons, and interneurons. The sensory neurons are the nerve cells that are activated by sensory input from the environment. If you're touching something, the sensory neurons will fire and send off signals to the rest of the nervous system regarding that information you just received. The motor neurons transmit impulses from the spinal cord to skeletal and smooth muscles, and it directly controls all of our muscle movements. The interneurons are the neurons in between. They connect spinal motor neurons and sensory neurons. So far we covered how neurons work and what neurons are, and the structure of a neuron, and the systems that you have. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you would have a good Thanksgiving holiday. Thank you very much.